My dear, some stories don't whisper. They roar. And my daughter posted, I wish she'd die already. I replied, I just changed my will. Well, this one trembles with betrayal so deep it could split the sky. Before we settle in, would you kindly tap subscribe? Leave your thoughts in the comments when we reach the end, and maybe share this with someone navigating the ragged edge of family heartbreak. Because sometimes the sharpest wounds come from the ones we gave our hearts to, and healing begins with finally telling the truth. Let's begin. The screen dimmed to black just after the last cruel sentence. I wish she'd die already. It read, cold, flippant, stamped with a heart emoji. The post wasn't meant for me. Not directly. But her name was there. Emily Rose Whitford, my only child, my ribbone girl, the one who once called me Mama Bear and left daisies on my pillow. I stared at that post as the silence in the kitchen thickened. The clock ticked louder than I remembered. My tea went cold. And my hand, though it trembled, moved with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I opened the drawer where I kept the documents. I picked up my will. And I rewrote everything. Not out of anger, but clarity. She had already let go of me in her heart. Now, I simply accepted the truth. The storm didn't come with thunder. It came in a silence so sharp, it cleaved us clean apart. Last Sunday, I sat alone on the porch swing, the one James built for me back in '82, creaking softly beneath the weight of everything unsaid. Muffin curled beside me, purring gently, unaware of the ache in my chest. The sun was setting slow, spilling gold over the rose trellis, Emily's favorite color as a child. She used to call it lemon light. I was scrolling through my phone, trying to find an old recipe she asked for months ago, when I tapped her profile by accident. And there it was, pinned at the top. A tweet. I wish she'd die already. Face with rolling eyes. No context. No name. Just venom and weariness. And yet, I knew. A mother always knows when the blade's meant for her. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I simply stood up, walked inside, and opened the fireproof box beneath my bed. That's when I changed my will. Not out of vengeance, but because something inside me shifted. If I was already gone to her, maybe it was time I stopped waiting for her to come back. When Emily was born, the doctor placed her in my arms and whispered, she's perfect. And mercy me, she was. 10 tiny toes like pink pearls, dark lashes sweeping closed, her breath fluttering like a moth against my collarbone. I named her after my grandmother, a woman of grit and velvet grace, and swore to raise her in love and light. We lived in a modest clapboard house on the edge of Charleston, where honeysuckle climbed the fence and cicadas sang lullabies in summer. Her daddy James was a quiet man, full of steady hands and soft laughs. We weren't rich, but we had rhythm. Sunday pancakes, Thursday library visits, bedtime stories whispered until one of us drifted first. Emily was curious, radiant. She loved puzzles, hated peas, and once convinced the entire kindergarten class that rainbows were the sky's way of smiling. Every birthday she asked for time, not toys. Can we just be together, Mama? That girl braided my hair when I was sick and left little notes in my work satchel that read, Best Mama Ever. But then came 13. And with it, a shadow. It started small, slam doors, sharp sighs, a certain edge in her voice. At first, I chalked it up to hormones, the terrible teenage tide. But soon, the silence between us turned brittle. Eye rolls replaced hugs. Secrets stacked up like bricks. And one day she screamed, You just make everything worse. James tried to bridge the gap, bless him. But then cancer came for him, swift, merciless, and took my husband before Emily turned 16. She didn't cry at the funeral. Just stared at the casket with dry eyes and clenched fists. I wept for both of us. After that, it felt like we were living in parallel worlds, barely brushing. I'd try to reach her with kindness, warm meals, gentle questions, letters slipped under her door. But she pulled further away, drawn into her own orbit of friends, screens, and smirks. By senior year, she barely spoke at home. College was her escape, and mercy, I was proud she got in. But even pride couldn't hide the hollowing. The phone calls grew fewer. Her visits rare. And when she did come home, she seemed agitated by my very presence. Like I was a relic she had to endure. I told myself she's just finding herself. Be patient. But patience can wear thin when silence becomes cruel. And when I saw that post, well, it wasn't just a sentence. It was confirmation that the daughter I raised was gone, and maybe had been for a long time. It took me 3 full days to decide what to do. 3 days of rereading her words like they were carved into stone. I wish she'd die already. Face with rolling eyes. 3 days of silence. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I'd said everything before. Every apology. Every olive branch. Every whispered prayer in the quiet hours. And mercy me, at 70, a woman knows when a door is no longer just closed. It's locked, bolted, and bricked from the inside. So on the 3rd day, I brewed a fresh cup of Lady Grey, laid out my journal, and I wrote, "Dear Emily, I saw what you posted. I wasn't meant to see it, I know, but I did. And it broke something inside me that may never quite mend. I've loved you every moment of your life, even the parts that hurt, even the seasons when you wouldn't speak to me unless I begged. I always thought you'd come back, not to my house but to my heart. But I think I finally understand. So I've changed my will. Not to punish you but to free us both. I'll be leaving everything to the library. The one where you used to read under the oak tree. You used to say it was where the stories live. I suppose this is just how ours ends. Mama." I folded the letter, pressed a petal from her childhood rosebush inside, and mailed it the old-fashioned way. No text. No email. No second draft. I knew she'd see it in 3 days. And I knew the moment she read it, she'd feel something. The next morning, the calls started. Blocked numbers. Unknown senders. Silent voicemails. Then came the texts. "What the hell is this? You're being dramatic. It was a joke. You've always been too sensitive." Each word more brittle than the last. And yet, she never once said sorry. Never once said, "I didn't mean it." Instead, she sent screenshots of news articles about elderly women being manipulated out of their estates. She accused me, her mother, of emotional blackmail. Told me she'd talk to a lawyer if she had to. But it was her next post that turned the first crack into a canyon. On her Instagram, where she hadn't mentioned me in years, she shared a selfie. Smiling. Perfect makeup. Captioned, "When toxic people finally exit your life, nail polish sparkles, #freedom, #healing. And that mercy me. That nearly broke me. I sat there on the living room rug, the one she once spilled glitter on during a 2nd grade art project, and stared at that screen until the tears blurred the edges. Not out of shock, but of grief. Grief that she could rewrite me into a villain so cleanly, so publicly. A few of her friends commented with hearts. One wrote, "Good for you, babe. Cut that cord." Another said, "She's the reason you needed therapy." I shut off the phone. And for the first time in my life, I wish she had never come home from college. Not because I didn't love her, but because I had loved her so much, too much, and now I was paying the price for all the ways I had clung. I walked outside and sat beneath the rose trellis. The blooms were heavy that year, blush pink and thick with scent. And I whispered, "What did I do so wrong?" That night, I dreamed of her as a child again, running barefoot through the grass, calling out, "Mama, watch me fly." And I woke up with tears dried in the corners of my eyes, still waiting for a daughter who didn't exist anymore. There's a peculiar ache that settles in a mother's bones when her child rewrites the story of their love as something shameful. And mercy me, it's not just the loss that stings, it's the betrayal of memory. After Emily's post about toxic people, the messages from mutual friends began trickling in. Kind-hearted folks from church. Neighbors who remembered her lemonade stand. Even her old piano teacher, Miss Lorna, now in a nursing home, called to ask, "What's going on, Ellie? Did I miss something?" At first, I tried to explain. She's hurting. She's angry. She doesn't mean it. But as the days wore on, I started to realize, she does. Or at the very least, she believes it now. And once a story like that finds its legs, my dear, truth gets trampled in the dust. The local library, where I'd quietly redirected my modest estate, invited me in for a chat. I thought perhaps they wanted to refuse, maybe found the gesture too grand. But no. Instead, they offered me something unexpected. A quiet room to dedicate. A little wing with my name on the brass plate above the shelves. Eleanor Whitford reading room, for stories that still matter. I sat there, blinking back tears, and said yes. And mercy, that small yes felt like the first choice I'd made in years that was entirely my own. But peace is a fragile thing when the past keeps clawing at the door. 2 weeks after the will was changed, Emily showed up. No warning. No knock. Just the sound of tires on gravel, and a car door slamming like judgment. I watched her through the curtain. High heels clicking down the walk, her purse swinging like a weapon. Her mouth set in that hard line I once saw only during debates in school. But now, it was her default. I opened the door before she could knock. She didn't say hello. She didn't hug me. She stepped in like she owned the place and said, "What the hell is wrong with you?" I didn't answer right away. Just gestured toward the couch and said, "You want tea?" "No," she snapped. "I want to know why you're trying to ruin me." "Ruin you?" I asked softly. "You think posting a passive-aggressive letter and cutting me out of your will doesn't make you look unhinged? What do you think people are going to say when they find out?" I felt my hands tremble. I folded them tight in my lap. "I haven't said a word to anyone, Emily. It's not me who made this public." She scoffed. "You don't get to turn this on me. You've always done this. Play the victim, act like I'm some monster." I stared at her, this grown woman with my eyes but none of my warmth, and asked quietly, "Did you mean it?" "What?" "That post. Did you mean it?" She hesitated, just for a breath, then looked me square in the face and said, "Yes." The silence after was louder than any slap. I nodded once. "Then I suppose we finally understand each other." She looked around the house, the pictures still on the mantel, her school awards on the wall, the old piano gathering dust in the corner. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "You are so damn self-righteous." "No," I said, standing now, my voice steady. "I'm just finished begging to be loved." She blinked like I'd struck her. Maybe I had, in a way. We stood there, 2 women separated by blood and silence. "You'll regret this," she said. "Maybe," I whispered. "But I'd rather regret the truth than live a lie." She left without another word. And that night, I opened the drawer where I kept the family photos, the baby albums, the vacation snapshots, the school portraits. And for the first time, I packed them away. Not to throw out, but to rest. I was done grieving someone who was still alive but unreachable. Done twisting myself into shapes just to fit her version of me. And as I turned out the lights and climbed into bed, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not peace exactly, but space. A quiet, aching space where I could finally breathe. There's a kind of silence that comes after a storm. Not peace, not relief, but the echo of everything that's been torn loose. The morning after Emily left, I walked through the house like a stranger, took down the photos, dusted off the empty corners, tried to find the shape of myself again. And it was then in the attic that I stumbled upon the old cedar chest. James had built it after Emily was born, carved her initials into the lid with a pocket knife the night we brought her home from the hospital. Inside were the artifacts of a girl who once loved me more than the world. A ballet slipper still smudged with mud from her first recital. The best daughter mug she painted at summer camp. A letter she wrote me when she was 8. "Dear Mama, when I grow up I want to be just like you. You make people feel safe. I think that's magic. Love, Emily." Mercy me. I sat on that attic floor for an hour, holding that letter, feeling the sharp ache of memory like pins beneath the skin. What happened to that little girl? Where did she go? Later that afternoon the pressure began. It started with an email from a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, Emily's fiancé's cousin as it turned out. A man who introduced himself with syrupy politeness, then proceeded to suggest that I was acting under undue emotional distress and may wish to reconsider my estate planning before it escalated to legal intervention. Legal intervention? I nearly laughed. Imagine taking your mother to court for choosing a library over a daughter who told the world she wished her dead. But the threat wasn't the worst part. The worst came later that week, when I visited the pharmacy. I was picking up my prescription, arthritis pills, nothing dramatic, when I caught sight of 2 women whispering near the greeting cards. They were glancing at me, not kindly. As I passed, I heard one say, Well, there's the one who abandoned her child for a building. And Mercy, I froze. That wasn't just gossip. That was her version of the story, spreading like smoke through this town I'd lived in for 70 years. I walked home that day slower than usual, every step heavier. At home, I poured myself a small glass of sherry and sat by the window as the sky turned lavender with dusk. I wondered, truly wondered, if I was losing my mind. Had I missed some great wound in Emily's heart? Some moment where I failed her so deeply she had no choice but to rewrite me as a villain? But no matter how many nights I stayed up replaying our past, from childhood lullabies to teenage outbursts to the slow drift of adulthood, I couldn't find the moment where love died. That's the thing about emotional erosion. You don't feel the cliffs falling until the house is gone. I began journaling again, something I hadn't done with such devotion since James passed. At first it was letters to Emily, pages I never mailed. Then it became memories, confessions, even poems. But one entry I remember most clearly. I think I've spent the last 20 years trying to be a version of myself she could love again. But I forgot something important. I'm not a version. I am a woman. A mother. A widow. Person. And I deserve gentleness too. Pressure kept coming. Emails from her fiancé. Messages from mutual friends, urging me to reconcile before it's too late. Even the church sent a letter gently suggesting that forgiveness and understanding are Christ-like virtues. I tore it in half. Not because I don't believe in forgiveness, Lord knows I do, but because forgiveness is not the same as surrender. Emily sent one last message before silence fell between us completely. When you're alone in a nursing home with no one left to care, maybe then you'll understand what you've done. And that was it. Not goodbye. Not I love you. Just a curse in disguise. So I did what I had to. I bought a plot near James, arranged my documents, and appointed Miss Lorna, God bless her, as my healthcare proxy. I left a note in my safe deposit box with a simple request. If Emily comes back after I'm gone, tell her I waited. But not forever. And then, I breathed. Truly breathed. For the first time in a long time, I chose to live without waiting for her apology. Because sometimes, my dear, the only way to survive the weight of someone else's absence is to stop building your life around the hope they'll return. The day the letter came was unusually hot for October. The kind of heat that makes the air hum and your blouse stick to the small of your back. I was in the garden, gloves on, pruning my roses, those stubborn, beautiful things that bloom even when the world seems determined to wilt. Muffin was asleep on the porch rail, one paw dangling, the picture of ease. I spotted the envelope before I even got to the mailbox. Cream-colored. Heavy paper. Handwritten, my name inked in the neat, careful cursive Emily learned in 4th grade. I'd have known it anywhere. I stood there, holding it in gloved hands, my breath caught somewhere between ribs and throat. Inside was not an apology. It was an invitation. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Emily Rose Whitford and Hayden James Calloway. She was getting married. Not a word to me beforehand. Not a call. Just an embossed card like I was a distant aunt from out of town. And at the bottom in tiny print, please note, the bride kindly requests a drama-free day. If attending, please refrain from discussing recent family matters. Thank you. Mercy me, I nearly dropped it right there in the driveway. I sat on the porch steps, the invitation crinkling in my lap. Muffin blinked at me, yawned. I read it again. And again. And again. A part of me, the stubborn, hopeful part, wanted to go. Wanted to show up in a lavender dress, bring a gift, watch her say I do, and pretend the last 2 years were just a bad dream. But the other part, the woman I had become, knew better. I had already been reduced to a story she tells in whispers. A footnote in her life, edited for her comfort. And now, even in her celebration, she asked me not to be myself but to be invisible. So I didn't go. I wrote one final letter, sealed it in an envelope the color of moonlight, and had it delivered the day before the wedding. Emily, I hope your day is as beautiful as you imagined. I hope your dress fits just right, and that your vows feel honest. I hope someone holds your hand when your knees shake, and someone else tucks a tissue into your palm at just the right moment. I won't be there. Not because I don't love you, but because I do. And I can't shrink myself to make room for someone who's already written me out of the story. You've made your choices. And so have I. I hope someday you find peace. The kind that doesn't require someone else to disappear for you to feel whole. Mama. I don't know if she read it. I don't know if she cried or laughed or tossed it in the trash without even opening the flap. But that night, as the church bells rang in the distance, I lit a candle on the porch. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea, and I said a prayer for her future. Not one of blessing or punishment, just of truth. And then I whispered something only the roses heard. I release you. That was the breaking point. Not a scream. Not a scene. Just the quiet, sacred choice to stop reaching for someone who only offered a closed fist. And in the stillness that followed, I felt something return. Myself. The weeks after the wedding passed like slow water, the kind that creeps over roots and moss but never makes a sound. I thought maybe, just maybe, silence would mean peace. But no, peace didn't come. What came instead was an email from a reporter. Subject line: Inheritance controversy. Daughter speaks out. I clicked it once. Read the first sentence. And mercy me. I sat there stunned as the screen filled with her voice, again. This time for the world to see. In the interview, she painted herself the abandoned daughter. Claimed I'd cut her out of grief. That I was vengeful after her father's death, and emotionally unstable. She said she'd tried to repair things, but I preferred strangers to family. Her fiancé added. We tried to help her. She chose bitterness. She said she'd wanted me at the wedding, but that I'd made everything about herself. And when asked about the will, she laughed. She changed it out of spite. Who does that to their only child? Spite. Mercy, if she only knew what it cost me to take my name off those forms. How long I cried that night. How I held her baby blanket for hours, wondering if I'd failed her somewhere beyond memory's reach. That article spread fast. People who once smiled at me in the grocery store now looked away. A woman from church asked gently if I needed counseling. And the library, the very one I was giving everything to, called again. This time with concern. There's been some backlash, the director said. Anonymous letters. Objections. A few board members feel the donation might attract controversy. Controversy. My life had become a headline. My grief a spectacle. My daughter's version of me, that bitter, lonely old woman, was being published like gospel. The trust was shattered. Not just between us, but between me and the world that once believed me good. And I had a choice to make. I could fight back, write my own piece, defend my name, spill the full truth. Or I could go inward. Choose silence not as surrender, but as sanctuary. I chose the latter. I drafted one final letter to the library, not to rescind the donation, but to revise its terms. I added a clause. In the event that my gift causes disruption, let it be redirected, quietly and without fanfare, to women rebuilding their lives after being cast aside. Let my name be removed if necessary. What matters most is that the stories find safe shelves. I didn't need legacy. I needed rest. Later that night, I walked through the house with a trash bag and collected the last remnants of our shared past. The gifts, the notes, the picture frames. Not in anger, but like clearing a garden choked with weeds. I kept only one thing. That letter she wrote at 8 years old. Because that version of her, the one who saw me as magic, was real, if only for a while. And some days, that's enough to remember. The trust may have shattered, but I didn't. I remained. The winter that followed was the quietest of my life. Charleston doesn't get much snow, but that year, the cold clung like grief, low skies, bare branches, the wind like a whisper that never stopped. The azaleas didn't bloom at all. Even the mockingbird seemed to hush. And mercy me, my house, it never felt bigger. I stopped going to church. Couldn't bear the looks, not cruel, just pitying. I let my hair grow out white without bothering to set it in curlers. Muffin became my shadow, following me from room to room, her presence more comforting than any conversation I might have had. Most days I made tea, sat in the sunroom with a blanket across my knees, wrote in my journal with a fountain pen. James gave me the year Emily turned 5. I wrote letters I never sent, poems I'd never read aloud. Recipes I remembered from my mama's kitchen, the ones I once promised Emily I'd pass down. But the silence, oh my dear, the silence started to grow teeth. There were nights I'd wake in the dark and forget what day it was. Sometimes I'd stand in the kitchen, holding a spoon or a mug, and not quite know what I meant to do with it. The radio stayed off. The TV stayed silent. I couldn't bear the noise. And worst of all, I stopped talking to myself. Now that might sound strange, but for years I'd muttered to the furniture, to the flowers, to James's old flannel shirt still hanging in the closet. But during those months, even that voice dried up. It's one thing to be alone. It's another to forget the sound of your own comfort. Friends called. Some knocked on the door. But I kept my answers short, polite. I didn't want to retell the story anymore. It had become a thing with sharp corners, something I couldn't hold without bleeding a little. The mail came. Bills, catalogs, Christmas cards with cheery pictures of grandkids I'd never meet. One from Emily's high school friend Cassidy caught my eye. She'd scribbled a note under the printed message. I saw the article. I don't believe a word of it. You were always kind to me. You made me feel safe when I didn't feel that anywhere else. I wept when I read that. Not because of the kindness, but because it reminded me I did matter. I still do. But even so, I didn't write her back. Not yet. Because the truth is, I'd sunk into something deeper than grief. It was mourning without a funeral. A ghost without a grave. Isolation changes a person. Makes the air thicker. The days longer. The light a little crueler when it finally touches your face. I stopped celebrating holidays. No tree that Christmas. No candle for New Year's Eve. Just quiet dinners, books unread. The television showing old black and white films I barely followed. I don't think I was waiting anymore. Just drifting. Floating in the silence like a leaf too tired to land. Until one day I opened the mailbox and found a letter that changed everything. But that, my dear, belongs to the next part of our story. The letter arrived in an envelope made of thick paper. The kind that crinkles like old hymns when you fold it. No return address. Just my name, Eleanor Whitford, in block letters.
No salutation. No declaración.
Just plain truth waiting to be read. Inside, there was no apology. No explanación. Just 3 lines, written in the handwriting I hadn't seen in years. I dreamed of you last night. You were laughing in the garden. I woke up crying and didn't know why. My breath caught somewhere behind my ribs. Emily. No signature, but I knew. A mother always knows the voice of her child. Even when it's written in lowercase and grief. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, that letter in my hand, staring at the sunlight crawling across the floor like a hesitant visitor. She was dreaming of me. Some part of her still remembered joy. It didn't fix anything. But mercy me, it cracked something in the silence, just enough to let light through. That night, I pulled out the journals again. Not to write about her, but about myself. About who I was before I became Mama. Before I became the woman who changed her will. I wrote about dancing barefoot in the kitchen at 16. About the boy who kissed me behind the library and never called again. About the miscarriage no one knew about before Emily came along. About the day James proposed with a tulip, because he couldn't afford a ring. I wrote about the parts of me that had nothing to do with anyone else. And in that process, mercy, I remembered I had a soul beyond motherhood. It's easy, my dear, to lose yourself in the role of caretaker. Especially for women like me. We love fiercely. We give endlessly. We quiet our own needs so often, we forget they even had voices. But in that season of stillness, I met myself again. Not the mother. Not the widow. Just Eleanor. I started taking little walks at dusk. Nothing dramatic, just a circle round the block. Watching the neighbor's cat dart through shadows. Listening to the wind tickle the dogwoods. I made soup from scratch again. I painted, poorly, but joyfully, a tiny watercolor of my rose bush in bloom. And one morning, I looked in the mirror and smiled. Just a little. Wrinkles deeper. Eyes tired, but still there. Still alive. I didn't respond to Emily's letter. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't ready to break the quiet that had become my chrysalis. Sometimes healing sounds like silence. Sometimes it feels like being your own mother. And mercy me, I was learning to rock myself to sleep. It was early spring when the knock came. Soft, uncertain. like someone testing the world's forgiveness. I was in the kitchen, humming to myself as I folded dish towels still warm from the dryer. The light was soft that morning, filtering through the lace curtains in honey-colored strands. Muffin perked up, ears twitching. Another knock. 3 slow taps. I wiped my hands and opened the door. And there she was. Emily. Hair longer than I remembered. Tired eyes. A scarf looped twice around her neck even though the weather didn't ask for one. In her arms a small box, plain cardboard held like it might shatter. "Hi," she said. My voice caught in my throat like a bird unsure if it should fly. She looked down. "I'm not here to argue. She held out the box. "I found these. I thought they should be yours." I stepped aside, silent, and let her in. She moved through the doorway like someone entering a chapel. Cautious, reverent. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded over the box like it was holy. "I didn't read most of it," she said, sliding it across the coffee table toward me. "Just found them cleaning out a closet. Letters. Photos. Old cassette tapes." I opened the box. Inside, a bundle of envelopes bound in a silk ribbon. My letters. All the ones I'd written her over the years. Every birthday card. Every college care package note. Even the one I'd slipped under her door when she failed her driver's test and locked herself in her room all weekend. And beneath that, a dusty cassette labeled in my handwriting. "Emily Lullaby. Age 3. I gasped. She shrugged. "Dad recorded it. You used to sing it when I had nightmares." I touched the plastic, remembering the scent of lavender lotion and the way she used to clutch my nightgown in her sleep. "I didn't forget everything," she whispered, almost to herself. "I just didn't know how to carry it all. Not after Dad. Not after everything." I looked at her, really looked. Not at the hard woman from the interviews or the child from the photographs, but the human being trembling in my living room. And mercy me, for the first time in years I saw her. Not the daughter I'd lost, but the one trying, awkwardly, fearfully, to come back. "I don't expect anything," she said quickly. "I know I hurt you. I know I cross lines I can't uncross. I just thought maybe if I gave these back, you'd know I kept them. That I never really let go. Not all the way." I reached across the table and laid my hand on hers. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't pull away. We sat there wordless while time folded softly around us. After a moment she laughed, a cracked little sound. "I never deleted your number, you know. I just didn't know what to say anymore." "You just said it," I whispered. We didn't hug. Not yet. But as she stood to leave I asked, "Tea next week?" She smiled, weary, hopeful. "I'd like that." And then she was gone. But the scent of her shampoo lingered in the hallway, and the warmth of her hand stayed in mine like a tiny ember. Not enough to burn, but enough to begin. We began with tea. Every Thursday at 4, rain or shine. No fanfare, no apologies rehearsed over text. Just 2 women with chipped mugs and cautious eyes, sitting across the kitchen table like strangers learning how to speak the same language again. First, we didn't talk about the past. We talked about books. About the lemon tree I planted last summer. About how her new cat hated everyone except her fiancé, which she admitted with a soft chuckle that felt like a thread stitching something back together. I served shortbread. She brought flowers once, marigolds, awkwardly arranged in a grocery store vase. She called it peace in a cup. And mercy me, it was. The 4th week, I showed her the letter she wrote at 8. The one I kept in my journal. She blinked at it, touched the crayon-scrawled word magic, and bit her lip hard. "I don't remember writing this," she said softly. "But I remember meaning it." That evening, as she stood in the doorway, she turned and asked, "Do you ever hate me?" I stepped forward, laid my hand on her cheek like I used to do when she'd skin her knee. "No, baby. Not even once. But I did have to let you go. To survive." Her eyes filled, and she nodded. We never called it forgiveness. We called it tea. Week by week, she started asking about James again, her father. I pulled out the photo albums, the ones she once asked me to hide. We laughed at his mustache in the 80s, cried over the picnic blanket we kept even after the ants ruined it. She asked what his last words were. "Tell Emmy she'll be okay," I said. He never stopped believing that. She cried into her hands. The following Thursday she brought a letter. Not a printed note or a typed thing, but 10 handwritten pages, folded into thirds, filled with the kind of honesty that shakes something loose in your soul. She told me about therapy, about feeling lost after James died, about thinking I didn't grieve the right way, about resenting my steadiness when she needed a storm partner. I thought you'd abandoned him before he was gone, she wrote. I thought if I screamed loud enough, maybe you'd finally fall apart with me. When you didn't, I decided you'd never loved us like I did. But grief, we learned, doesn't look the same in every room. She fell apart loudly. I fell apart quietly. Both of us drowning in different rivers. One day, months later, she brought Hayden, her husband. He sat on the porch with James's old flannel blanket wrapped around his shoulders, listening to our stories like they were scripture. He apologized for his cousin for the article for standing by while things broke. And I, in turn, let them see the Eleanor that still hums jazz in the kitchen, that still writes poetry on grocery receipts, that still believes in love even when it's messy. By the time fall returned, the house no longer felt like a museum of sorrow. It felt gently like home again. Emily brought a new photo to hang. Us in the garden laughing at nothing. She wrote in the corner, "Started again here." The climb wasn't steep. It was slow. It was full of slips and stillness. But mercy me, it was real. And one morning, over toast and marmalade, she looked at me and whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't fight for you sooner." I reached over, squeezed her hand. "You came back." That's the only part I'll remember. The day she called me Mama again, mercy, it was like the earth paused. We were sitting on the back porch, 2 blankets draped across our laps, tea steaming in mismatched mugs. The roses were just beginning their second bloom. Late autumn rebels refusing to go quiet. Muffin lay curled at Emily's feet, purring with the soft ease of trust. She was telling me about her garden, her new apartment, how she burned the sweet potato casserole last week and cried over a Tupperware of mashed peas. And then, without even realizing it, she said, "Mama, do you remember that time we got lost coming back from Myrtle Beach?" I froze. Not because of the memory, but because of that word. Mama. She hadn't used it in years. It came out so easy, like it had been there all along, waiting under her tongue. She didn't even notice until I reached across the table and placed my hand on hers. She looked up, wide-eyed. And then she whispered, "Oh." We both smiled. No tears, no declarations. Just the quiet warmth of something found again. That was the beginning of the real return. From then on, things weren't just visits and check-ins. They were moments. She started bringing her laundry again, not because she had to, but because your sheets smell like memory. We cooked together, clumsy and laughing, elbow-deep in flour. She asked me to teach her how to can tomatoes, something she once swore was too country. We planted tulip bulbs in the side garden for the first time in 20 years. Then came Christmas. She surprised me with a framed copy of her apology letter, printed on handmade paper, tied with a velvet ribbon. "I wanted to keep it real," she said, "to remind me where we were and how far we came." I cried. She held me. We didn't talk about the will again. It didn't matter anymore. Legacy, I realized, isn't what you leave behind. It's what you heal while you're here. In January, she invited me to her apartment. Not out of duty, but joy. She made chicken and dumplings. Liconde. Played Ella Fitzgerald on the record player we used to own. And there, in her living room, on that old velvet couch, she told me something I never expected to hear. "I'm pregnant." I gasped. She laughed, nervous and glowing. "I was scared to tell you," she said. "I wasn't sure if, I don't know, if I was allowed to want this with you again." I stood up, took her cheeks in my hands and said, "My dear girl, this is where the circle begins again." She rested her forehead on mine. "I want her to know you, really know you, the way I forgot to." And mercy me, I held her then, my daughter, grown and broken and blooming all at once, and felt something in my chest unclench. We'd come back from the edge. And not as the same people, but as truer ones. The spring Emily gave birth, Charleston was drenched in magnolia and birdsong. The hospital room was pale green, sunlight spilling in through half-open blinds, and I sat in the corner chair, heart still, hands folded, waiting to meet the future wrapped in flannel. She named her Clara Rose. After my grandmother. After our shared stubbornness. After all the women who held on when it would have been easier to let go. When the nurse placed that tiny girl in my arms, mercy me, it was like holding every prayer I'd ever whispered at night. She was perfect. Newborns carry the weight of hope like secrets in their fists. And Clara? Oh, she carried something sacred between us. Emily watched me the whole time. No wolves. No hesitación. Just tears, quiet and shining, clinging to the corners of her eyes. She's yours too, she whispered. We didn't need to say it out loud, that this baby wasn't just her fresh start but ours. A continuation. A soft mending of something once so jagged. That summer, Emily asked if I'd move closer. Not into her house. We both needed our spaces. But nearby. A little cottage just 3 streets over. So Clara can grow up with her gram around, she said, blushing. And so I did. We walked together most evenings, baby in the stroller, laughter spilling into dusky air like honey. I'd sing lullabies as we strolled past blooming camellias, the same ones I once planted beside our old porch swing. Clara would gurgle, reach for the sky, and sometimes I swore she already knew me in a way deeper than flesh. Emily called me nearly every day, sometimes to ask about recipes, other times just to say, "Guess what Clara did today?" But often, just because she missed me. One morning, she handed me a folded sheet of paper. "I've changed my will," she said, teasing, "just in case the internet ever tries to cancel me again." I laughed, but when I opened it, tears prickled the corners of my eyes. It read, "To my mother Eleanor, for the love that endured, for the forgiveness I never deserved, for teaching me what survival wrapped in softness looks like. This life is yours too." We hugged without words. Because the words had already become flesh, in Clara's tiny hands, in our shared dinners, in the quiet understanding that forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it redeems the present. That fall, I was honored at the library's dedication ceremony. The Eleanor Whitford reading room finally opened, quiet and beautiful, with Clara's first books lined on the bottom shelf. Emily stood beside me, hand on my back, proud. When I spoke, I didn't mention the betrayal, or the pain, or even the long silence. I simply said, "Every story here is a second chance. And mercy me, so was mine." Clara's 5 now. She has her mother's eyes and her grandfather's quiet smile. And every Wednesday after preschool, she runs down the little brick path to my front door yelling, Gram, read me the bear one." We sit in the old rocking chair, the one James repaired the year Emily turned 10, and I read Brown Bear for the 100th time, complete with silly voices and tickles on the last page. Muffin, ancient and dignified, dozes nearby like the guardian of all stories told under this roof. Emily joins us most afternoons, sometimes with takeout, sometimes with fresh-baked muffins she swears aren't from a box, though I know better. She curls up on the couch, watching us, her eyes soft with something I once feared was gone forever. One day, Clara pointed to the rose birthmark on my wrist and asked, "Did Mama give you that?" Emily laughed. "No, sweet Bea. That's from God. To remind her she's special." Clara nodded like it made perfect sense. Like a superhero mark. And mercy me, I think that might be the truest thing I've ever heard. I still keep the letter, the one that broke me, tucked in my journal. Not as a wound, but a witness. Proof that the darkest night can lead you back to morning. That even the deepest silences can end in song. And some evenings, after the dishes are done and the porch light hums, I sit with a cup of tea and whisper to the wind, "Thank you for letting me live long enough to see love return." Not every story gets that gift, but mine did. And mercy, I'll hold it close until the very end. If my daughter posted, "I wish she'd die already," I replied, "I just changed my will." Echoed anything inside your own story? I'd be mighty grateful if you'd leave a comment below and share what stayed with you. Pass this tale along to someone who might be carrying old wounds, the kind that don't show but still bleed. And if your heart's still healing from a silence, a goodbye, or a moment you never got to explain, mercy, you're not alone. Subscribe, my dear. There's always another story waiting, and I'd be honored to meet you there. Until then, take care of your heart. And if love knocks twice, let it back in.